Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Noona's Noonchi podcast, where we talk about K-culture, K-food, K-dramas, K-pop, and more. I am so excited to have bestselling author Christie Golden. Christie, thank you so much for joining me. Let me tell you a little bit.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit how I got to know her, besides her being famous, but Twitter. I just saw some of her Twitter posts going a little viral or something because it said hometown cha-cha-cha, and I was like, wait a second, that's what I'm watching and I love it. So I started reading what she was talking about with hometown cha-cha-cha. And of course, you know, then you got a lot of Kim Sun-ho fans, right? Following you, and everyone's like, Christie, we love you. We love that you're talking about this. And so that's how my love affair began. I guess it could have been before, but you write science fantasy, and I can't wait to hear about that. But the way you talked about hometown cha-cha-cha, which is what we'll talk about, I could tell how much it affected you. So that said, thank you, Christie, for joining me. And you know, I love talking about K-dramas from just a well-being perspective, mental health perspective. But before we get into that, let's just first talk about how your journey into Korean dramas. When did it first start for you? Are you I would say a new fan, rookie fan, or an older fan?
I'm kind of an advanced beginner, I'll say. It was purely by accident. Good old Amazon, Prime was like, we think you might like this, and started spamming me with ads for Goblin.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, yeah. And then for whatever reason, one day I looked at it and I was like, this sounds kind of interesting. And that's all she wrote. I mean, I was in there. I loved it. It was my first experience with this. So a lot of things that I've come to recognize that you see very commonly were new to me. And I'm like, so why there seems to be a lot of emphasis on putting your head on someone's shoulder or the grab by the wrist. Yeah, these things that I now know are staples. And, bless the Twitter community. They're very kind sometimes. And I was like, I don't mean to offend, but can someone please explain to me why these are important so that I can understand? And people were great. And they're like, oh yeah, that's kind of like your mind thing. And Koreans do not show a lot of physical emotions. So putting your head on someone's shoulder, let alone going to sleep, is a lot of trust. And I was like, oh, this is great. This is really enhancing it. I love the story. I loved Reaper. So I love historical stuff. I love fantasy. I love science fiction. And I was so surprised to see this nobody told me. Nobody told me K-dramas are so awesome. I just had to find this out. Thank you, Amazon. All on my own. And it was really funny because when I finished it, I was talking to, I work for a video game company and I'm one of the writers. And I was telling everybody, this is really cool. It's a very interesting way of telling a story, and it's very interesting. And a coworker's head popped over the partition. She says, are you talking about Goblin? And I'm like, yes, and so that was really kind of funny. So instant bump there. And honestly, I have to digress to make sure that we don't skip this. That post, I've talked a lot about shows. I make posts all the time about shows. I even posted about Goblin, and then, later some other things that we'll get into later. But for whatever reason, Twitter was feeling nice that day, and the algorithm kicked in, and suddenly I'm getting stuff from everybody. And I was like, well, it's completely sincere. I was like, I felt bereft at the end. What am I going to do? There's no more Ganjin. I need more Ganjin. I need more of this amazing community. I need more of this adorably cute couple. How am I supposed to live? Kind of.
And you did say that. You're like, what am I going to do without Ki Fong and Kongjin and we all related and I think when you posted, it was probably timing too. You had just finished we were all still watching it. I forget what it was. And of course we were so engrossed, and it was a top rated K-drama. So it was up to the caliber of Goblin. Maybe it got a little bit more attention than Goblin, but yeah, so let's talk about that, because Goblin makes sense to me. You're a fantasy sci-fi writer. I think that makes sense. But then hometown cha-cha-cha, and it surprised you. Let's break it down. What got you so enthralled and in love with this community that you were lamenting on Twitter?
Well, I think I have always approached fantasy and science fiction with the idea that people are people. you know, whether they're aliens or whatever, there's something to them. And I always like to try and understand them, because I believe that more unites us than divides us. I truly believe that.
I believe that too.
And so I always try to bring that to my work. So it's not like I don't like things that aren't science fiction and fantasy, but here was this lovely little thing. And of course, I love seaside town stories, wonderful. I'm a sucker for a good rom-com, but what really got me was the writing and the subversion of some of my expectations. And when I'm trying to, I feel like I should be, I'm like wandering around practically tapping strangers on the shoulder and saying, have you seen Hong Banjang? You know, I just feel like this is my missive. I told my writers group, I said, guys, you need to watch this. This is a masterclass on setups and payoffs, on slow burns, on writing a story with no villain.
Yeah.
How is that? You know, where's the conflict? And we can get more into what the conflict actually is. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad person trying to stop you or kill you.
Very true.
And I just was absolutely hooked. And all of the characters had their stories, and all of their stories were interesting. And the acting was amazing. And the cinematography, I just want to move in. I love the ocean. And it just, and there was this build that you knew something wasn't as it seemed. But not in a scary, monstery type of way, but just there's something here. And I remember, I found out later that Kim Sano has a line, he says, I'm always smiling. I mean, that's just the actor. So that was kind of a nod to it in that line. But I was like, yeah, you are. Nobody's always smiling. What's going on? Something's going on, you know? And I watched it more than once. And it's a joy as a writer to go back and see, oh my gosh, that was mentioned in the first 15 minutes and it got paid off in number 11, for example. Yeah. And here it is, and here it is. You should have seen this coming. It was there all along. They didn't cheat you. They played straight with you. But it just was conversation, or if it was just a thing that happened. And then by the end, you're like, oh, did this amazing human being do all of this? So I have so much respect for the skill that takes to weave all of this. And I write sometimes very big stories with, you know, past of thousands, right?
I was gonna say, this is a huge compliment coming from you to the writer. Just saying, writer, if you're watching this, just saying. Yeah, well, and I agree that what writing was beautiful.
It's absolutely sincere. It's absolutely sincere. And I'm always of the belief that I can learn and grow. And I loved anime before it became very popular. I mean, you know, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. And so I love that because it was a different way of telling the story. It was a different way of approaching it, of choices made and how to tell the story. And I'm fascinated to see other things than, the same old thing, You know? So, and I thought the whole thing was, there's a nugget of wisdom that I think is always true. And that is, when you're trying to tell the story of a character's journey, you have to start with, what do they want? What do they think they want? And what do they need? And how those two dovetail or don't or become. And I think everybody in here kind of had a place where they thought either in our present through the telling of the story or in their past, what they wanted was not exactly what they needed.
Yes. And I love, of course, we got to point out your virtual background, to your ode to love of the hometown cha-cha-cha. So as you're watching, you're right. You did go viral, and it does account for the fact that both actors have huge followings. First of all, she's very well known. He a little bit has been in the field less, I would say a little bit less time, but super popular. So that said, it makes sense that your post would go viral and everybody was following you going, what else is Christie gonna say? Including me. I was like, yes, you're just saying things that we're all thinking. And it's like bittersweet when it ended. So let's break down some of the big poignant moments for you when you're saying the writing's so beautiful and what you think you need and what you don't need, but then what you could, what's best for you. Let's first talk about the main characters. So what is it that you loved about the leads?
I thought Okay, so Hyun is set up and you think she's going, the first shot, she's competitive. You can see it, you see it. She's not going to let this group of joggers pass her. She gets there and she's a little stiff and awkward in the elevator. And you think, do I like this character or not? And then she basically walks out because someone is cheating the clients and she's just not going to stand for that. And I'm like, wow, I'm invested. Why does she feel this way when it seems like she shouldn't? It seems like she shouldn't have this thing. Of course, we start getting all the beautifully, subtly laid clues, the date, what's the date today? And then, she's going back and you realize, oh, she's a daughter who's lost her mother. So she's sympathetic to someone who has a daughter who loves her so much. So that was really interesting. It was like, okay, I'm ready now. I'm going to learn that there's so much more to this character, that I don't know. So I'm ready to go on the journey with her. And of course, Dusik, that entrance, I mean, and he's so sweet and he's so thoughtful. And again, the introductions to these were brilliant. I mean, writers tear their hair out about how do I introduce this character, So you've got to get people excited, especially in television. You've got to get people invested early without showing your whole hand, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, but we see him, he's got tea for the poor, so he speaks Russian. He speaks Russian. He knows sign language. There's clearly so much going on here, and he cares about everybody. He goes to the market and he's like, "Hey, how's your grandson? Yeah, show me a picture." And just a lot of concern and a lot of care for people, which is why it's so interesting that he's so, what's the word, kind of snotty. To her when she's like this, like you're not one of this, like I have to be nice to you. And that one thing is like, oh, he gets the little treats and he like smiles and his file just disappears as he hands it to her. And what I like about this is you watch this and you go, I know what I'm in for. I'm into, happy-go-lucky, free spirit meets straight-laced city girl and they fall in love. And you think, and you're not wrong to think that.
Yeah.
But that is so small a piece of this iceberg that is revealed.
Yeah.
And I think I know a couple of people I've introduced to it and they haven't gotten past an episode or two because it's a slow start. And if you think that's what you're going to see, that's all you're going to see. So, but there's so much more to that.
And that's interesting that you said that. So you've tried to get people so into it, but they haven't got past episode 1. And for you, how did you get past episode 1? It got you right, like you were hooked right away, or you were like, let me see what this is about?
Well, I know that just because something is deeply familiar and is a trope, that doesn't mean really anything, because it depends on how it's used and how it's subverted and how it's played with or followed. And you can take the oldest story, in the book, and make it fresh, because there's a reason, and people don't know this, there's a reason you can't copyright an idea. They think, oh, I have this great idea, I'll copyright it. I'm like, no, you can't, because ideas are open. It's the execution of the idea, the specifics of it, that gets copyrighted. So you give a room full of 30 people a writing prompt, you are going to get 30 completely different stories. So I know that, that's part of my career is to know that. And I knew everything else was going so well. The acting was great. The dialogue was sparkling, even in translation, which I imagine, by the way, shout out to, we call them our localization teams. We don't call them translator, because they do more than translate. They capture, they find a joke comparable to the English version, but that the audience will resonate with. They don't just translate it. It's like, because sometimes you'll translate a joke and you're like, that's not funny at all.
Yeah.
But if they know your sensibility and they have something else, and it means pretty much the same thing. So it's such a skill set. It's so much more than just knowing words. It's understanding how to place them properly. So I thought the translation that I saw was excellent. So the dialogue was sparkling. I mean, Kim Sono, he's very cute. He's easy on the eyes, as they used to
I
say.
would say so.
And so I'm like, I'm here. I've liked other K-dramas before, you know, and I haven't been disappointed yet. So I'm here for that. And I like a slow burn. And that's one of the things I love best about K-dramas is the slow burn.
It's true, because we have like 16 to 20 episodes to like, you know, get into that. I was going to ask you, what made you pick Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha?
Again, it just kind of kept popping up. Power of advertising, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, well, I like the premise. I like the idea of, you know, opposites attract and by the seaside.
Yes.
It was a huge part of it. And I'm so glad they recognized how much a part of how big a character Gunjin itself
It is. Yeah.
And that's kind of why we love it. I mean, I see so many people saying the exact same thing I did. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? This is, you know, so nurturing. And it's so kind. And we're in the midst of this pandemic where everybody is raw and everybody is tired. And I found the K-dramas to be that pretty much all the case, and all the ones I've watched, they are comfort shows. But this one in particular was like, sit down, find that comfy blanket. Here's some hot cocoa.
Yes.
And we're going to take it. We're going to tell you a story. And it did not disappoint in the slightest.
I would say that like there were tears every episode for me just because it's touching. I tend to just tear when it's like the grandmother's just saying stuff and they're funny, but then they're endearing. And then you're just like, you know, you described it so well. Get a warm blanket. It was comforting and just simple to watch. Like it was actually for me, like a way to unwind, but then people unwind and just watch, but I would unwind but get more rejuvenated watching because it would just kind of, you know, heal the soul. Right. So let's talk about the side characters. So yes, we all love Tushik and what was Shinmin? Oh, Hejin, right? But then we have the second lead, you know, the classic trope, which I can tell you, I love the way they did. They also featured him as well. Just the story and how he's like BFFs with Tushik's character. You know what I mean? Or some Kim's character.
And that was one of the glorious things about this show is it did all its tropes deliberately. It wasn't just a checklist. It's like, we're going to put this in here and then we're going to play with it. Yeah. You know, so there were there was the catch and fall between, you know, the traditional one. Yeah. And then he catches them. Right. And then both of them catch him. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, I am so here for this. This was just delightful. And it was genuine. It wasn't just shoehorned in there for the laughs. It was there because these three people really cared about, I'm going to start tearing up. The scene where director sees, but I'm kind of fond of you too. Yeah. And I'm just like, this is what I need. This is, you know, the joke is wholesome, but it is wholesome. It's like, oh my gosh, we are people and we can care about other people and it's okay. And nobody's winning here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so how did that hit you? Because you even said you teared up. Is it, if we're going to talk about Western dramas or just comparing other media and forms of mediums that we see, do you feel like we don't get to see that as much? I mean, I want to know your interpretation.
I think so. You know, it's always fun to have a love triangle. It's fun. It's dramatic and like this, but somebody usually gets hurt at the end of it. And that's the payoff for the entertaining drama. Right. You know, it's like you want this, you're going to have this too. And this found a way to completely subvert that. And one thing I actually want to dive into a little bit is, how do you have a show with no villain? No even antagonist. There wasn't even an antagonist in here. Right. And I was thinking about this morning in preparation for our talk, and I was like, I think the antagonist is our inability or unwillingness to find the block stick in action. Because you look at all of them and they're, you know, some of them are still rooted in their trauma and they're not connecting. They're not being open. They're not letting themselves be vulnerable and forgiving the really hard things and including yourself in some case. Because some of us, that's our identity, is this thing happened and I feel responsibility for it, and that's who I are. So I think that was the antagonist. That was what everybody was trying to overcome. to grow, and this
Wow, you just got me
unwillingness to
chills.
grow.
That's, yeah. Can you tell me I'm like, I'm like trying to talk. That is so poignantly said. Yeah, the antagonist is, I guess, ourselves, or the conflict within ourselves. And you're right. I think that also made this comfortable, that there was no antagonist of going, oh, there's the second lead. And, right. We had the second lead, but he was like besties with probably closer to Tushik than he was with Pension by the end of the drama.
Yeah.
And them giving advice to each other. So you're right. And then of course I have to bring in the harmonies, the grandmas.
Oh man.
Bring them in,
Yeah, like I told you, my mom is up there. So that was all of that. Right in the feels, man.
Yeah. And then did you see, okay, this is a spoiler alert, but I'm pretty sure that everyone would have seen it. So at the end, when one of them passes away, did you see that coming?
I was afraid. It was because of the content warnings. I was afraid that that might happen. And I've seen some takes that say that was a huge mistake. I don't think it was. I really don't think it was. And then you go back of it and you're like, you listen to her as she talks about things. It's all there in the first episode. And it's consistent throughout. And if we are going to deal into spoilers, I love how it was handled.
How it was handled?
We could cry together.
Yeah.
I love how it was handled. I love that she could let go. And she even says so in a couple earlier episodes, I have nothing, no more dreams left.
Yeah.
They've all been realized. And I love how Hyejin and she were both there at the right time to save him. And it feels like she's lived a good life. Excuse me.
No.
She had lived a good life, a true life, and she's aware of her blessings. And she can let go now because all the things that she's been entrusted to take care of, they're all fine.
I told you. I will be honest with you. I did feel like it was coming. I think my husband and I, we watched it together. We kept saying, okay, we think it's going to be sad, but not sad, meaning it was sad, but there was also healing involved. Everything. Right. And so
it was absolutely necessary.
Yeah,
in retrospect, it was necessary.
Not depressing. Sad is the word is not, sorry. So it was sad, but not depressing. But you're right. And then I'm sorry, but I would like to, if that's the way I would die in old age, I would love to die like that, in peace, happy with my besties next to me, and knowing that everyone that I love is taken care of, if that makes sense. So that's when it just made sense. But of course it was like sad when you think about it. So yes, definitely emotional, but let's talk about how even with that, in her death, there's others that healed. I feel like.
Yep. The son had a reckoning.
Yes.
That he has to now look at and go forward. And it was the final thing I think that Dusik needed. And because after the second to last episode, you're like, well, where are they going to go from here?
Yeah.
Where are they going to go? And that was when I was afraid. But it really did seem like it was a necessary part. And there were two things, though, when he was talking, what really got to me, I lost my father 10 years ago. And we had a great relationship, really, really great, positive, nurturing relationship. And I still miss him. I mean, there are still sometimes things that will remind me of him and I'll start crying. I mean, but you move on, you live with it, you integrate it, and he's always with me. And there was that line, I can't remember exactly what he said. He says, but right now she's not quite gone. And I'd like to have her with me for just a little. And I'm like, that is so true. There's that moment and you know that they're gone, but they're still there, just for a little bit. And you're going to get to that deeper part, the second wave later. And that's, of course, what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. So that said, because because as you were sharing on Twitter, I almost felt like it was therapeutic for you to like share things on Twitter about your
I
experience,
love to share
right?
things.
I was going to ask you, I mean, obviously we've already gotten emotional talking about this K-drama, but how has it, how has it impacted your life? I mean, obviously you're already talking, I know it, I can tell it has. What has it been like for you? And, you know, I love looking at things from a mental health perspective. How has it helped you? How has it, I don't know, reframed the way you look at things? It's a big question.
I think during the pandemic, and also just because of my nature, I'm actually kind of a shy person. And it made me realize how important community is. And it has kind of lit a fire in me to start being aware of that and to start trying to cultivate it. And it can be awkward, right? You know, because maybe sometimes people don't want to hang out with you, and sometimes they do, but they can't. And you need to know the difference, and, you know, all this other stuff to start community, especially as an older woman. And, you know, college is easy, man. It's friendships can bloom all over the place. It's a little less of a garden when you're older. And especially, we've all been so isolated, so incredibly isolated from each other. And that's really, some of the reviewers are saying it was the perfect pandemic show. And it really was. It really was. It showed how powerful these connections are. And it also, it's urging me to up my game, because this is an amazing piece of storytelling, and I'm inspired. I'm inspired by that.
I was just going to ask you how it affected your writing, but yeah, you just said that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, how is it making you up your game? In what way? Because you're a best-selling author. So tell me what, yeah.
Gosh, that's a really good question. It's more of a feeling than anything else, but I'm rewatching it, like I said, and I'm watching it with an eye towards this. And as I say, I think the setup and payoffs are masterful, absolutely masterful. They're written well, they're delivered beautifully so that you do remember them. It's not just a side thing that you forgot about. You remember it, but you don't think, I need to remember this. You know, it's just like, oh, you know, but it's, you know, weeks later, you remember it. Just so that, and the pacing and how she made all of the characters feel fully realized. And I'd actually like to talk a little bit about Oyun.
Oh, yeah, of course.
As a creative,
yeah,
I totally identified with him.
mm-hmm.
And her comment that was overheard was, if he really wanted it, all he needed to do was just keep trying, you know? And I'm like, oh, creative fields just don't work that way. And luck is a lot of it. Timing is a lot of it. You may have a great idea for a book, but the world may have moved on to something else, and your book would have been great 2 years ago. Sorry. And whatever. So there's so much that goes into it. It's like, I had a great blessing. I love telling this story. I had a great blessing when I was very young and very ignorant. And I went to a book fair. I was working for a magazine. I went to a book fair, and I was toting my first manuscript, the one I'd been writing through high school and college, you know, and I just thought it was the bee's knees, man. And so I met with somebody there who was an author at a publisher that I later ended up selling to years later. And he just sat me down out of the kindness of his heart, and he just said, oh, he says, I'm going to give you some advice. And, you know, he pointed out, he says, don't bring your manuscripts to people. I'm like, I didn't know. This was back before the internet. People today should know better because they can Google it. But this was 35 years ago.
Wow.
And so I didn't know. And there were all these things that he told me, and I've never forgotten that act of kindness. And I wonder how much just these few simple things that he told me, I wonder how much that helped me going forward. You just don't know. I answered an audition. That book never got published, but I answered an audition because I had gotten on a mailing list, and that's how I got my first foot in the door. These things are so random. People say, how do you get it? I'm working in gaming right now. They say, how do you get a job in gaming? I'm like, well, first you answer an audition, and then you write 50 books. I don't recommend my path.
Yeah.
It's like, it's kind of erratic. It's not really followable. But there were some downtimes. publishing is so drastically changed. It used to be like you got a shot or maybe two, and that was it.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people were writing under pseudonyms. You know, the publishers knew who they were, but it beat the computer that says this name cannot sell, you know, books.
Ah, interesting.
And so I was on my 7th book, and a friend of mine, very prolific author, very well established, a friend, and doing this to, you know, The Cruel to Be Kind, said, I'm so sorry, but you're done. You've had more than one shot and you're just not going to make it.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't know that I believe that. You know, I just, for whatever reason, I was like, I don't think so. So I just kept at it, and things came my way. And, you know, here we are 30 years later. Wow. But there was a drought where I had 3 projects canceled for something that had nothing to do with me and everything about how they were rearranging, nothing. But there goes like 3 years worth of income, right? You know,
right.
I do. So it's rough. It's not been smooth sailing for me either. And yes, determination and a desire does get you further than just putting it the first sign of rougher waters. But so much goes into that. And so when she said that to him, I'm like, oh my, you know, I felt that. I was like,
oh, because you related to OU, and I can totally tell that. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, oh God, no, it isn't. When he's told the story, I'm like, oh my God, that's the saddest thing I've heard. And then for her to dismiss it. And I love how she made it up to him, not just by saying, oh yeah, I liked it, by saying, you know, I still don't like that, but this is amazing. And meeting him on his ground and describing why she liked it. And his goals and dreams shifted. Yeah. But I loved at the end where he gets that phone call. I was just like, he's got a whole, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be as if he was a hot pop singer or whatever, but maybe he's going to get to teach people. Maybe he's going to get to, you know, he's going to get to be interviewed. What's going to happen with his life? It's not the dream he had. Yeah. But it's not entirely gone.
It's not. And he got excited about that. And I want to say that's the power of the community. The PD, the producing director, doing all that to put them on the map. And then that's how, you know what I mean? It all intertwines. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of kindness. You know, I mean, I'm just like, be kind, be kind. It doesn't cost you anything. Take a breath, just be kind. And it was so lovely to see so much of that in the show and how it was appreciated.
Yeah. And you're right. That's what makes it the perfect pandemic K-drama, because we've had a rough time during the pandemic. There was so much that happened, right, in our nation and the world. And then we see kindness. Speaking of which, have you seen My Mister? I think I recommended it to you.
I have not yet.
Okay.
That's on my list.
It is, I have to do this plug. It's very similar in the sense of it's a slow burn, but it's a little bit even slower because it doesn't have a Kongjin feel of like light and sea breeze and beautiful water. It has a dark is not the right word. That's too strong. A little bit more depressing feel, I'll be honest, but it's not a depressing K-drama, but it's all about the power of kindness. And I just think it has the same message, healing message as Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha. It's just done very differently. And it's a little bit more real and raw than Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha, but I highly recommend it. And that's actually the K-drama I'll talk about for years. But I would love to see your reaction. Just stick to it.
Definitely.
Stick to it for the first 3 episodes. Just keep watching, and then it'll shift for you. And I don't know, I hope you experience what I did, which is like believing in humanity. I just have to share that.
Nice.
Kindness. Kindness
is it nice to believe again? Isn't it nice to think?
It's nice to see that.
So jaded.
It is our life. But when you said kindness, that word is in itself, we don't see too many anymore. This kind of sounds morose, but it's nice to see it in that K-drama. And that's why I think it also appealed to so many people. It's just a community that was around. And I loved, by the way, Kongjin also being Pohang, it just looks fun. I want to live there. You know, coming to the city when I can, but just live there. And I'm sure that's an inspirational place for you to write.
I would love to visit. I definitely want to visit for sure.
So that said, as we're kind of coming to a close, I feel like, is there something else I didn't ask you about Hometown Cha-Cha that you're pressing that you want to share?
Let's see. I made notes. Let me see. Yeah, just a couple of things. I know the power of the elevator pitch, right? Do you know what I mean when I say elevator pitch?
Yep.
It's, yeah, you distill your idea into something pithy that people are instantly going to get.
Right.
And the two things that I say about this show is I said, it fills your heart, breaks it, and fills it again. And the other thing I say is it's a small show about big things. And it's been amazing. I've really enjoyed all the characters. Oh God, what's her name? Namsook. She's probably just one of my favorite characters. I've seen that actress.
That's another thing about K-dramas. You'll have someone comical who will like break the ice and just say something or do something. And she really was funny, but she was also an endearing character too, who had her own story that we find out. I love that.
She had her dream was broken.
Yeah.
She lost her child. Yeah. But she found another dream in donating in her little girl's name. And when I realized in the scene where that money gets taken, what it was, my anxiety level just sky, it's bad enough. It's like, oh my gosh, it's not her life savings. It's what she's going to donate. I'm like, oh, that's even worse. I mean, just because she's not just using money, she's losing a dream.
Yeah.
And she was so funny. She was
funny.
Best lines.
But don't you think at the end she was pivotal in some aspects, right? And then the fact that she and Hejin having her own conflict with people, being too direct and cold at times, ended up, is the one that kind of like went after the guy who stole her money. And I love the way K-dramas do that, so she's another family character. I'll also share one of my favorite characters was the wife, the seafood restaurant owner.
Hwajong?
Yes, Hwajong. Thank you. One of my favorite characters. Again, another tortured person who was also hurt, but she's strong. But then I loved that breakdown episode between her and her ex-husband of reconciliation, which you also don't get to see a lot. Divorce a marriage coming back and healing. Right? There's just so much. And then the kids.
They were great. They were all of them. All of them were great. Just great. Yeah. Hwajong was wonderful. What a great, warm-hearted woman. And I know a lot of people for whom that couple is like their favorite. Okay, we love these two, but these guys, I just really like their dynamic and their growth. Again, their enemy was not each other. Their enemy was failure to take a hard look at themselves and see what had gone on. And so I like that because it's the conflicts that we create or that we develop in the face of trauma. And some of them serve us for a time, they protect us, but you can't go to that next level of development without opening your heart and being willing to have it hurt.
Yes. Yeah. So well said. So that said, I got to have you repeat your elevator pitch again, because I thought it was so beautifully said. If for people who have not seen Hometown Cha-Cha or who have, and who are super fans of the show, what's your elevator pitch? I'd love for you to say this again.
It's a small show about big things. It fills your heart, breaks it, and fills it again.
Gosh. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you, Christie,
for being with me.
Yes, this is great. Thank you for asking me.
Yes, so we'll have to, and if you want offline, we can always do more deep dives into Hometown Cha-Cha to lament about it. It was so good. The great thing is we can always rewatch it.
I know.
Netflix.
I know. I'm greedy. I want more.
Yeah.
I just love it. And I do want to do a special shout out to the community, which has just embraced me and has been so kind and so supportive. Really, it's been, because fandoms are not always warm and fuzzy.
Yeah.
And this one has always been kind. It's like, other fandoms are angry about this, that, or the other thing. And every fandom has its downside and its dark side for sure. But I look around and I'm like, this fandom is sending out coffee trucks.
Yeah.
And it's raising money for charity.
I know. And I've talked to some of these fandoms, blessed by what they're doing based on obviously Kim Sono's personality and what they love about it. And it's amazing. Yeah. So I thank you for the shout out.
He seems to be like such a really sweet, genuine, kind spirit. And that's who the sort of person he's attracting, and they're trying to follow in his footsteps. And I think this is amazing. And I wish I would love to see more of it. I'd love to see more of it. And in the meantime, I'm like, this is probably one of the best things about the pandemic, was being embraced by this community.
Yeah.
And
yes, totally. They love you.
you know, love y'all so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christie. We love you too. Thanks for sharing those posts where we all empathized and just showed compassion on each other, because that's the best thing about K-dramas, the community too, to share it with. So I hope your elevator pitch goes a long way. I'm going to use that too. Quoting Christie Golden, you guys need to understand this is a small show about big things, and it'll break your heart, fill your heart, break it, and then fill it up again. So important. Thank you, Christie, for joining me. Can't wait to have you back with your next K-drama.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thanks. Bye.